On behalf of the members of the Connecticut Academy of Science and Engineering, welcome to this episode of Learning and Living STEM in Connecticut, the podcast of the Connecticut Academy of Science and Engineering. My name is Tan Deleon. I'm an elected member of the Academy and serve on its governing council. For more information about the Academy, please visit www.ctcase.org. That's www.ctcase.org. Our topic today is artificial intelligence. Here to discuss what it is, what we should know about it, and what states are thinking about and doing related to artificial intelligence is State Senator James Maroney, Deputy Majority Leader in the Connecticut General Assembly, representing Milford, Orange, West Haven, and Woodbridge, and Nick Donofrio, Fellow Emeritus, Executive Vice President, Innovation and Technology, IBM, and founder and CEO of NMD Consulting LLC. Nick and Senator Maroney recently served as co-chairs of the Joint General Law Committee of the Connecticut General Assembly's Artificial Intelligence Working Group. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Tan, and good to be with you.
Dan, thank you so much for having me here.
It's great to have you both. Thank you guys for agreeing to speak with us today. So let's get right into it. Which one of you wants to start first and take on this huge task of explaining what is artificial intelligence?
Nick, how about you take that one? I like to give you the easy questions, so I'll jump in when it gets a little harder. So
Thank you, Senator. You see what I had to put up with, Tan, when we co-chaired this committee. What a perfect marriage. And by the way, Tan, you should probably note the reason I was the co-chair was because of Case,
Okay.
because the senator actually wrote into the bill that legislated this study that Case would help. And then I was asked I'm a member of Case as well. I was asked to be that representative. It was an incredible experience, just to be blunt with you. Probably the best 6 or 7 months that I spent working on such an incredibly important topic. So, what is artificial intelligence? Number one, it's been around for a very long time. So, it's not like there's anything new here. It is basically a productivity aid, a tool that allows certain repetitive tasks to be done in an automated fashion once you figure out that it's happening. So you can query what's going on, and then because you see that happening on a regular basis, you know these become the answers. So it's quite, I don't mean to trivialize it, but it's really not that complicated. Like all good things, you have a problem, you write an equation to solve the problem, you go get the data to complement the equation that you're using to solve the problem, and you run the model to see exactly if you're solving the problem. And if you're not, you constantly tune the equation or you tune the data until you get closer and closer to the answer that you're looking for.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't sound so complicated. It is if you're dealing with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of people and billions of bits of information. And you're trying to do this more or less in a real time sense and make real time decisions. And what's happened is technology has kind of caught up to that state of the art that was developed, 60, 70 years ago, arguably. And now it democratizes it, Tan. So all of a sudden, now it's showing up everywhere. It's no longer the aegis of the druids, the intellectuals. It's now me and you, the mere mortals of the world can deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's that flush, if it makes sense to you. It's that flush of, okay, technology is bringing it forward faster, and that's not going to end anytime soon, by the way. So as much as you've seen, you probably have seen nothing, in terms of how popular this is going to become and how ever present it's going to be in your life, that's what prompted this. What are we going to do?
Sure.
How do we deal with this issue? Because you know this, being a technical person, there's good things and there's bad things. And I mean, all technology, I'd like to believe, was originally created for good things. But there are bad people who put it to work doing bad things. I mean, this happens all the time, over and over again. We've seen this.
Yeah.
And what the senator and our task force wanted to do was to take a hard look at that. Let's assess the consequences, known or unknown, good or bad, as AI is deployed across the state of Connecticut. And that's what we did for 6 or 7 months. And it was, like I said, it was just an incredible experience. We got a lot of wonderful people from the state of Connecticut and from other states to join us, to tell us what they were doing. Companies supported us. And it was all at the initiative, just to be blunt with you, of the senator. This was his initiative. He brought it out, and he had the steady hand on the wheel. All I was doing was basically giving him the technical guardrails, if you will, to kind of drive this process down the road. James, does that sound about right to you? Or
Yeah, no, I echo that it was a great experience for me. I think meeting Nick has been a blessing for me and learning from him throughout this process. And it was a stroke of luck that I did write case into the initial bill because I did get to meet Nick and work with him and learn from him and so many of the things he's been teaching me. And as you think about them, you realize they're true. And you go around and I talk to conferences. Nick, the big thing you talk about the future is small language models, and now other people are finally starting to echo what Nick had been telling me for a while. But it was a great experience. Another thing we were fortunate, in addition to Nick, another IBM alum. Who was on our task force, who's also another case member, was Dr. David Ferrucci, who worked
Okay.
on the Watson project at IBM. So we were fortunate in Connecticut that we have great technical talent and that people were willing to take the time to educate me, but then also to work for trying to create some guardrails. And I think Nick and I share the common belief that to see the full upside potential of AI, we need to mitigate some of those downside risks. And we talked about, the taxonomy of risks. There are these known risks because this isn't new, and we've seen examples of discrimination in algorithms going back over a decade. And so that's something we need to address now, right? And it's the known unknown risks we worry about as well, but it's those unknown unknowns that are the hardest to legislate for or to think about. But we're focused on mitigating those known risks now and taking a risk-based approach.
Okay.
and
Oh,
and Ton, if I could just add to that,
please.
I want you to know that Case stepped in the middle of the task force. We needed a piece of work done on the whole issue around education and what was really being taught in Connecticut, what the Connecticutians really understand about it.
Okay.
Case did an amazing job in what I don't think more than 3 or 4 weeks, Todd. Several case members stepped in, did the study, presented it, of course, to the task force as well. So um, I know we're talking to case members with this video. Hopefully, others will see it. You can't say enough good things, and I think the senator now understands this about the potential value of case to the state of Connecticut, especially as the state wants to continuously become that innovation hub that it once was, Todd. So these things were all kind of linked together in my mind, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
And also looking forward to help from Case going forward. They're
Yeah,
working with Case to get a technology fellow
yeah,
placed with the state Senate so that they can
yeah.
assist with developing the legislation as well as expanding on that great report they did last year to give us another report on how we can utilize AI to assist our small businesses and interviewing small manufacturers to kind of tease that information out from them. So it's been a great, as I say, it was fortuitous for me that we wrote them in, but now we're really going to try to make the maximum use of all of the skills that you offer and bring to the state.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It seems like this whole thing's been multifactorial in the approach and execution. So uh, it's uh, it's a win-win for everybody. I would say. So just want to dive in just a bit deeper, Nick, on the definition of artificial intelligence. When we say artificial intelligence, like the term sounds like a misnomer. So it's like artificial intelligence systems, they're not actually intelligent, are they?
No, no, you got it right, Tan. I mean, I don't know how we ever put that name to it, but I do remember the first lecture I gave on this topic. I'll never forget it. I may have said this to you before. It was when Michael Jackson and the moonwalk was popular, and I was literally speaking to a high school class, and they were all very bright students. They were all worried about this, like artificial intelligence. It was just like, that's got to be out of science fiction. Should we be frightened by it? What should we know about it? So I tried to calm them down, just like you're suggesting.
Yeah,
Wait a minute now. I want you to remember, behind all of this is people like you, or those who are going to come after you. So stay in control. Don't let your mind run away with the consequential bad things that'll happen. And by the way, if they do happen, you're smart enough to fix them. You're smart enough to detect them, and you're smart enough to correct them. So I never was a big fan of the name, but it is what it is, and I'm not about to try to change it. So you have to have these kind of conversations that says, look, underneath it all
sure.
is a human being. And you've heard this regenerative word used here.
Yep.
I mean, I'm an electrical engineer, Ton. I don't know what type of a scientist or engineer you are, but a good electrical engineer never plugs the output into the input. I mean, that's like, are you crazy or what? Not without some kind of a control,
Yeah.
on it. And we actually talked about this on the task force with the senator and our other
Yeah.
colleagues. Keeping humans in the loop, very important. Who monitors those equations? Who monitors the data time? I mean, the data, in my mind, and the senators heard me on this before, is the biggest worry. I mean, you more or less control the equation, but you're searching for other data. A lot of the data you could be collecting to validate that model or to feed that equation could be synthetic data.
Yeah.
There are people out there using AI to generate the data to get the answer that they want out of your equation, to kind of put the bias in, which is what we were all worried about,
Sure.
or put in, so much stuff that you lose it, but 2 years from now, it does exactly what it wants to do to you, and you have no idea why that happens. So all of these things are knowable, Ton. I can't. I don't know how else to say it. They're never. The computers are never going to. I am not. A singularity person. So I should have said
Okay.
that up front.
All
I
right.
don't believe in that theory.
Okay.
Um, Maybe it's got to do with the fact that I'm 60 years in this industry. But I do believe that we'll always have to have humans in the loop, constantly reviewing this. That's why we call them guidelines. We weren't trying to create a set of rules or regulations. Honestly, Tom, when we were working with the senator, we had people offering us test suites. Like, yeah, I'll give you, let me be the certifier, for the models or for the data. I'll show you how to look at it.
Sure.
I'll show you what the test case needs to look like, almost like an underwriter's lab, to kind of certify you that, yeah, that's a good application. That's a good use of data. So I think you've got to think this way, because the bad people are thinking the other way.
Sure.
The people who are going to abuse it are thinking the other way. So we just have to keep applying it to keep finding where the errors are, where the problems are, where the vulnerabilities are, and dealing with them up front, reporting them. We were big fans of self-reporting, self-inspection, self-reporting. You don't need an agency to do this. Just here it is. Here's the guidelines. Here's the model. Run it yourself. Just tell me if you're out of bounds and tell me what you're going to do about it. I think self-reporting is probably a better way to go, and most people we talked with loved the idea. They didn't think there was anything bad about it. Wasn't going to hurt their innovation. Wasn't going to hurt their productivity. So I can't say enough, Tan, about we're in control. We're only going to be out of control when we give up, and don't give up. I mean, I don't know what else to say,
Sure.
right? As long as you don't give up, you remain in control. Senator, how do you feel about any of that?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we're looking at the initial bill is just simple like product liability. Test it. Just like my grandparents made toggle switches. They had to test all of them before they shipped them. So just test to make sure that it's safe. And in our case, we're just testing to avoid biases. And
Okay.
there are ways, we may need to look at creating benchmarks so that people can compare against benchmarks, and perhaps having the state create some sample data sets people can use to test their model. And so those are things we're talking with people about to try to figure out. In the bill, we were looking at, self-reporting, but I think in next year's bill, it'll still be self-reporting, but if you use I'm looking at incentivizing third-party audits because again, not requiring it, but I do feel in the long run that's where we're going. And I think working with Nick, learning in what Wayne Gretzky said, skate where the puck is going, not where it is now.
Sure.
And so I think that, just like for companies that have um, your finances need to be audited depending on the size of the company, how strenuous an audit is. I think at some point that's where we'll move, but there's not the industry there yet. And so I think by creating some incentives to kind of create that industry, we need to look at standards and who you would be able to sign off on. And that's going to be work over the next year to get there. But the other thing is, we did receive some pushback from investors who said that it would be too much for small businesses. But what I heard, I was just at a conference and they had a lot of the larger companies were there. I was speaking with people from IBM, some of the others, and they had people presenting on a board perspective. And they're not going to acquire you unless you're doing these things because they don't want to take on the risk, right? And if there's too much risk, it's not worth it for them to acquire a company that is using risky practices. So I think that really, as Nick liked to say, correct by construction. Build it correctly the first time, and that's really cheaper in the long run and better for everyone.
So Tan, if I could piggyback
Sure.
on
Please.
that comment,
Please. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we heard from great companies like Microsoft and Google, as well as IBM, when we were doing our work, and they were clearly in support of what we were doing.
Okay.
Somehow we got ourselves sideways, as the senator said, with the investment community, who thought we were going to curtail, innovation in the state or startups in the state.
Okay.
And it actually turned out to be the other way around in my mind. I did my own little survey and I actually found out that most of the startups want this too. Like I've got better things to do than to make it wrong
Sure.
or to violate your law.
Sure.
Just tell me what the regulations are, or tell me what the guidelines are or guardrails are. I'll do it that way. Because as the senator said, most technical people are hardworking technical people. They want to build it correct by construction.
Yeah.
They want to do what you want them to do so that they can deploy it and make success out of it. And the second piece of this is never ending, Ton. I know that sounds a little frustrating because as much as we know now,
Hmm.
we know it's changing again. So, 70 years to now, it's a big gap. And now everything seems to be on that super exponential curve where it's accelerating faster. We see some of the changes the senator pointed to, these more specialized language models versus the large language models. That's where the money is.
Yeah.
That's where the innovation will be,
Yeah.
is in a localized, specialized, industry focused language model. You're also seeing the chip providers to put more AI onto the chips to accelerate and use less energy, running these language models, whether they're large or small. So you haven't seen the end of it yet. The balance isn't really quite where you think it is. We are not going to have to build power plants to power AI. I don't know who started that rumor.
Okay.
But I'm not a big fan of that. That's totally inefficient. I think we can do a much better job of getting this, to an engineered solution that is very practical, very pragmatic, and very reasonable. And that's why I want everybody to understand we're on that steep slope of the super exponential curve. And, there's a lot of rise for a small run, given where we are. So eyes wide open.
Okay.
As the senator knows, we've talked about this many times, and we have to be prepared for where it's going. That's his Gretzky comment. You have to because it's moving faster than you think.
Sure.
We'll be over here trying to worry about something, only to find out that isn't really where the problem is. The problem is over there.
Yeah.
And now what are we going to do? Does that make sense to you, Tom?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, you did mention this, like you're not a singularity person. So for those on the line, that's just in essence when the level of human intelligence equals the intelligence of a computer. So uh, that seems very far fetched and very much out there with respect to how our AI has taken shape and has been formulated thus far. But so with that said, and with focusing on, as the senator said, some of the biases that can be inherent in artificial intelligence, due to the fact that it is scraping information, as Nick mentioned, that could be falsely created by other people so that they can perpetuate whatever beliefs they would like to the world. Uh, if we are to look at these guardrails as mentioned, what does that actually look like? What does the structure of that policy look like? Is there an educational component to that structure? Is it going to look something like the EU AIs Act that just took place this past August? I mean, they do have like a I guess getting comfortable period for companies, which is like a year or 2 years before it actually takes full effect. But they mention biases and certain behaviors that are stereotypical in that act and stuff. So I don't is how is this going to take shape for Connecticut, and will that be a stepping stone for a national conversation or a federal conversation?
Yeah, so thank you. And yeah, we did look very closely at the EU AI Act. We had representative from the EU present to our working group, and so we are definitely taking pieces from the EU AI Act, and mainly taking a risk-based approach. And these are what we determine right now are the high-risk areas, and that's the automated decision making, algorithmic decision making. If you're making a consequential decision, an important decision about someone's life. And we look at it now like a hiring decision. Depending on the survey, 80 to 88% of companies are using AI for screening resumes. We know there are examples of bias going back probably over a decade or about a decade. Amazon, had developed their hiring algorithm. I think the article was out in 2018. I think they initially developed it in 2014 and never brought it live because to their credit, they discovered the mistake, made it public as a teachable moment, but they were trying to figure out how to hire technologists, and at the time, most technologists were men, and so the algorithm, as it went through, if it found out, and at first it was only wanted to hire men, so they said, "Okay, we'll correct it," and then they went in, but it still worked around, and if it saw that you were on a women's soccer team or any other way it could determine you were a woman, you weren't passed on for hiring, right?
Oh,
And so algorithms, again, they are biased and discriminate in many ways,
sure.
right? And so there's the SoFi example. And so another important
Mhm.
life decision is what determining financial, right? And so access to loans, and so student loans, where if you were going to an HBCU, a historically black college or university,
Mhm.
you were given a higher interest rate than if you were going with everything else was controlled to another college or university. And so again, as we mentioned, if you're scraping the world the way it is, and AI at its heart is a prediction machine.
Yeah.
It's taking what happened in the past and using that to predict what's happening going forward.
Yeah.
If we know that there are biases in the world the way it is, and we're going to learn from what we're doing, we're at risk unless we stop, test, right? What gets measured improves. Unless we stop and test it to eliminate those biases or mitigate, we're at risk of perpetuating and amplifying those biases. And then we look another risk, and we can look at housing. And depending on the survey, 50 to 70% of large landlords are now using AI to screen tenants. And there are a few examples. There's one from Connecticut. There was a lawsuit filed on, I think it was 2018. But another one from California, a man named Chris Robinson was denied getting an apartment in a senior living facility, a senior apartment, because he had a littering ticket. I don't know if you call it a conviction or what you would call it,
Yeah.
on his file. And so a few things are wrong with that. One, there's nothing that says if you litter, you're going to be a bad tenant. Two, the bigger problem was it wasn't him. It was a Chris Robinson who lived in Texas. The ticket was in Texas. He had never been to Texas. And so that's why another part of our bill, which is something that did pass in Minnesota this year, was to require that if you have an adverse determination by an algorithm, you have the right to an explanation. And then from our data privacy laws, you already have the right to correct data about you. So that way, if you know that a decision about your life was made on wrong or erroneous information,
Sure.
you would have the ability to correct that. So going forward, you wouldn't continually get rejected for those apartments. And so that's another important piece. But so we did look at the existing frameworks. And so there was a bill in California. Originally, it was AB 331, an algorithmic discrimination bill. This year, it was AB 2930, Assemblymember Bauer Kahan, who also presented to our working group. And we did model after that. In addition, we worked closely with Senator Rodriguez from Colorado, who did pass a version of our bill, the Colorado, and once we pass it, it'll be the Colorado Connecticut framework instead of just but they did pass it first.
Very nice. Okay.
But we worked very closely, and I was with them last week, and our goal is to try to, we don't want a patchwork. And so we're working with a lot of other legislators. We actually have an informal working group where we meet twice a month, and our mailing list has 47 out of the 50 states, and we regularly have about 25 plus states on our call, legislators, members of attorney general's offices, and we're working together to try to develop a framework. And we recognize there will be some differences, but we want to make it possible for companies to comply, because most of us worked on data privacy and have no faith in the federal government to come up with a bill quickly enough. The states, I think, can act much more quickly. We're the laboratories of democracy, and we've seen that with data privacy, where it's been iterative, where each state is kind of built on what's been passed, and we expect the same for AI. But if you look at data privacy, the federal government has been looking at it since 2001. The last major comprehensive data privacy bill that was passed was 1998, COPPA. And I think knowing how fast things are changing, knowing the fact that we've had harms going back over a decade, we can't wait 25 years uh, to pass a bill. And so, and again, that's why it's important we engage with people like Case. We engage with the companies and as many people as possible to build a bill that's possible to comply with. And there was a seminar, I think it's the Committee for Economic Development back in May, and the CEO of a company on that seminar said that, I think Novalex is the name of a privately held company, and the CEO said that when industry and legislators work together to craft well thought out legislation, it's actually pro innovation.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of what we're hearing from a lot of people, and that's our goal in bringing Case on board and Nick, and talking with as many companies as we have, and encourage anyone who's listening really to reach out. I'm assuming it'll be a lot of your Case members who will have something to add and help us to continue to push this forward.
Tan, do you now see why we were paired together?
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get the point here,
Yep.
right? And I should just compliment the senator, Tan. He is not only recognized nationally and internationally, but we spoke to a number of the Connecticut legislators, and it didn't matter what side of the aisle
Yeah.
they were on. They respect them, they value him, they appreciate him, they listen to him. They don't always vote with him,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they do actually understand and appreciate the fact that he's doing this leading edge work for our state. So, and I do too, by the way. So thank you, Senator.
Yeah, no, it's a very important thing. You know, you have to be able to work with people from all walks of life, and coming to consensus is always a hard thing, but it is important. And as the senator said, bringing industry into the discussion is probably one of the most vital things you can do in order to try to push this effort forward, as opposed to doing it in a vacuum and saying, hey, why don't you try this, so totally concur with all that. So if we're setting all these potential barriers and guardrails to keep us moving in the right direction. And as the senator said, waiting 25 years is going to be a long time, and the growth of AI is going to completely outweigh that by the time they actually do anything that's of worthwhile. Is there a an immediate, like right now, thing that people in the public can do to help support pushing this effort forward for Connecticut, or for the country as a larger? Should they speak to their local government constituents? Is there anything that you would recommend that we as the public try to consider in helping this effort?
Yeah, I thank you for that question. Yes, I would say reach out. Um, all, Most legislatures in the Connecticut are citizens legislatures, meaning we're part-time, right? And we don't necessarily have large research staffs to assist us. So if someone has technical expertise, volunteer it. Reach out first to your representative and then ask them if they're not working on this issue, if they can put you in touch with who is. And if they want names in any of the states except three, I'd be happy, for them to reach out to me. But I think that one of the things is just reaching out to let their legislators know that this is important to them and it's an issue that they want them to work on, because otherwise people may think it's a solution in search of a problem, right? And I think that's sometimes that they're afraid, why are we doing this? And so the more that people reach out to their own legislators, the more it'll help us to get the bill passed in the end. And, on large areas, it takes a lot of people to reach out to a legislator, like meaning a controversial, where you're going to get a lot of emails.
Okay.
On most topics, it's 10 to 15 people who live in your district reaching out that could change your vote, right? And so most topics you don't get this a large group of people reaching out. So I would say offer your expertise if you want to help, and just offer your opinion that you think it's important that they work on this and get behind this type of an effort.
Yeah, I think I would compliment that if I could,
Please.
Senator and Tan. I I think we need a better education program.
Okay.
I think we want to do more of that. We everyone should understand and feel comfortable with this. So if you don't, we should find a way to help you become more comfortable, at least to understand it in a basic way so that, it's not beyond you. I mean, we tried to describe that earlier. Maybe we need to do it even simpler. We also need these skills in Connecticut. So we have to get our K through 12 system and our post 12 through 20 system. We have to get that teaching. We have to get more people understanding what we were just talking about: the data, the equation, what are the problems, how do you do it correctly, and we have a lot of smart people, by the way,
Sure.
on this commission
Yeah.
that we co-chair. And by the way, I think you can those commission videos are public documents, so you could view them if you wanted off of Connecticut Network. So I think a general education program to make people more comfortable, speak up, speak out on the topic. If it's an inhibitor, we'd like to know why you think it's an inhibitor.
Yeah.
But that's not our intention. That's not our purpose. So work with us to understand. What would you like? What do you need? Why are you thinking this way versus that way? You can't, I mean, you just can't communicate enough on this topic. So we want communication, collaboration, cooperation, coordination. If we could just kind of move down that path together, we'll create the best innovative environment, in the United States, if not the world. Because that's why and what big ideas will be built around, where they know they're not wasting their effort. There is nothing they're doing that is going to be questioned later, and they can get focused on creating real value. So, I mean, complementing what the senator said, by all means, get in touch with your elected legislators, but speak up and speak out and learn more. Is the other thing I would ask people to do.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank
And
thank
just
you both
to
for that. Please go ahead.
yeah, just to build on
Yeah,
what Nick said,
please.
yeah, it's important that we get as many voices as possible, right? And so my son is a freshman in college, but last year's college applications, reading through the essays, one of the things that struck me is they asked him the question, "What's something interesting you learned in school?" And so he talked about Bletchley Park, right? And the way we solved and broke the German Enigma code was bringing together chess players and puzzlers, Navajo speakers. And what's the lesson? Broader voices, right? A diverse voices create a better product.
Yeah.
We need various perspectives, and so we want to make sure we're incorporating as many voices as possible. And I think that's how we'll get the best product. And to build on what Nick said about the education, even though the bill didn't pass last year, one of the things we were able to do is to create a Connecticut Online AI Academy, which will be launching in November of this year. And hats off to David Ferreira of Charter Oak State College. It's going to be free AI training for all Connecticut residents. Actually, you don't even have to be a Connecticut resident. And please, avail yourself of that opportunity, but more importantly, help us spread the word about that. Because one of the concerns, when you look at the education is this year in July, Microsoft and LinkedIn annually do a survey on hiring, and 66% of companies said they wouldn't hire someone without generative AI skills. 71% of companies said they would take someone with less experience in generative AI skills over someone with more experience. And then finally, last December, McKinsey had a report that had said if we don't roll out generative AI thoughtfully, there's the potential to increase the racial wealth gap by $43 billion a year. And so we need to make sure that we're getting training opportunities to a wide variety of populations to make sure that we're not, that, I mean, the converse of that McKinsey report was if we do it thoughtfully,
Yeah.
if we reach out to as many people as possible, there is the possibility of decreasing the racial wealth gap. And so I think we talk about AI for good. And that's one of the things we want to make sure if you're using it for hiring, it's not biased, but we also want to make sure we're building the skills and giving all the citizens the opportunity to improve their lives.
Thank you both for that. And I like the fact that Nick, you talked about, if you think it's an inhibitor, we want to know about it, right? Because most people just want to know the good things that help bolster, their position. And the fact that you're saying that is a key marker of someone or an effort or a complete effort that's more inclusive as opposed to being trying to be exclusive. And Senator, I really appreciate what you said with respect to the wealth gap and trying to make sure this is equitable learning for everybody, because it reminds me of a phrase that Cassioppo and Petty came up with, which is called the need for cognition, right? And the whole idea behind it is that a need for cognition is a luxury, right? So if you live in a safe environment, you don't have a need, you know where your next meal is coming from, etc. You don't have to worry about, being shot if you go outside, etc. Right? You have the opportunity to take time to think, to be able to learn. You have that space, right? You can make that space. You're not, working 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table,
Sure.
right? So I think making sure that wealth gap doesn't get stretched even further is extremely important. So I know that we've had such a invigorating conversation here, and I want to try to ask both of you if you can provide advice to a young person in the state right now that's looking to either go into AI, or move into the technical field, or go into public service. What advice would you give them out of your lives and your path, that good or bad, either way, right? Because I mean, it's not all roses and iced tea. There's a lot of hardship in there. What advice would you give some of our young folks that are listening?
James, you give advice all the time, so why don't you go
Uh,
first?
Why don't uh, why don't you start, Nick? Is that
So,
okay?
yeah, of course. So,
Because
look,
you
I'm an electrical engineer. Um, I'm an electrical engineer for 60 years. I'm 60 years in the industry this year. Um, the best investment I ever made in myself, or my parents ever made in me, was enabling me to be an electrical engineer, because everything is changing so rapidly. So, to the young people, you have to kind of realize that what you see is really not what's going to be there by the time you get there, because it's all going to continue to change. And you're not going forward going to be judged simply by what you know. You're going to be judged more by what you do about what you don't know, because there's so much more to know. So I know it's trite, lifelong education, but it's real. I knew nothing about life sciences. I hated biology. I never took it in high school because I just was squeamish with biology. But now I'm on the board of a life science company. Um, because what you find out is that everything is interconnected. The progresses we've made in life sciences are truly because of the progresses we've made in physical sciences. You're going to continuously find that everything you do is connected to everything that you see or everything that's around you. So for young people, kind of get that passion in place for always being willing to learn, always be willing to understand, and always be willing to change. Have a high capacity for change. Lead it. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Don't frown about it. Embrace it and lead it. And then I'm going to get one last plug in. We need more. We need more physical engineers. We need more people who are willing to build the hardware on which we're living. We're talking about AI, up here in the stratosphere. And, I kind of mentioned before about the fact that chips are going to end up bearing some of that by putting some of those out. There's going to be more of that.
Yeah,
We need more people in this country who are willing to work on the physical engineering sciences. I'm sure Pratt and Whitney needs them. I'm sure Electric Boat needs
yeah,
them. I'm sure Raytheon needs them. We know ASML needs them. And they're just a few names, here in Connecticut.
sure.
But the country needs them. I mean, that's what the Chips and Science Act is all about. Is bringing that talent base front and center. We have a gap. We have a real gap of maybe 10 or 12 years that we have got to make up. And therefore, anything I can do to influence young minds to become one of these people, I call them, physical engineers, physical science engineers, please give it some real consideration. And as the senator pointed out, we need more diversity.
Yeah,
We need more diversity in this population. It can't stay the population that it is. And if you need a thing to remember, if you're really looking for true innovation, look at the room you're talking to. And if everybody in it looks like you, then you should stop and ask yourself the question, are they the people? Are they the only people who have the missing piece to the puzzle? And how much better off would we be if a lot of other people who don't look like me were in the room. Over, sir.
Well said. Senator?
It's hard to follow that. Can I change and say that I'll go first, and we could no, but this is, you can see why it's been such a great honor for me to work with Nick, and why I wanted him to go is he's so generous with his time. He's mentored entrepreneurs, people who've started companies, CEOs of large companies, and he's been so generous with his time and his knowledge and his experience. And so, for people who are listening, definitely those are words to follow. Nick's book, I'll plug his book for him. If nothing changes, nothing changes, which was a great read. But it's also the importance of, if we want different outcomes, we need to do things differently. And just talking about, I think, right, Nick, to his credit, has been embracing diversity and working on programs like that since the 90s, right? Well before it was popular. And I think you recommended I read the book Rewired by McKinsey, which is about leading the digital transformation, where there's data, right? And companies that embrace diversity, because, like you said, of bringing in a variety of thought, have almost a 25% higher return on their investment. And so it is the key of getting people to challenge you, people who don't think like you, people who have different life experiences, so they bring a different viewpoint. As far as my advice to young people, my experience before I was a legislator, I tutored SAT, and so it's about process of elimination. So I can tell you all the things not to do, as I like to tell my cousins. I'm the oldest of my cousins. I made mistakes, so you don't have to. But after saying that, what I would say is find a mentor. I think that's something I didn't do as good of a job as, but so many people who have experience are really willing to help you. Just ask. People have lived through, and I know you always think things are different, but there are some universal truths, right? And there are things that are the same in business and in life, and that you can learn from someone who's been through it. And so that's, I guess, the best piece of advice I can give is find a mentor, and if you're lucky enough, you'll find a mentor like Nick.
Aha.
So,
Well said. Well said. Well, folks listening, you don't have anything else to to follow, but follow those words of wisdom right there. I mean, that's as good as it gets. That's as good as it gets. So I would like to thank you both for your time today and for this discussion. I hope that folks listening get a lot out of this, and I hope it spurs new questions for them
Sure.
that they can take to their local legislatures and help spur further discussion on this topic. On behalf of all of us living in Connecticut and others tuning in from other states, thank you, Senator Maroney and Nick, for sharing with us information about artificial intelligence, what we should know, what policies and regulations states are considering. You've both given us a lot to think about. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
yeah, thanks for having us.
Listeners, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube, and visit the Academy website again at www.ctcase.org to learn more about our guests, read the episode transcript, and access additional resources, as well as to sign up for the case bulletin. Thanks again, Senator Maroney and Nick, for being our guests.
Tan, thank you for the great job leading us. And Senator, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Nick, right back at you. Always a pleasure. And Tan and Case, thank you so much for having us and for your help.